Welcome to day 23 of Bible 365 with Kathy Carter, which is me. Today is the 23rd day, and today we are going to go over Job. And this is Job chapters 15 through 18. So, just for a moment, I want to give a quick background of what we're doing because we're kind of in the middle right now of the book of Job. I'm reading through the Bible in 365 days chronologically, which is why we're in Job at day 23 instead of in Job, a few months down the lane when it shows up in the actual Bible. And if today is your first day that you have seen this, that you found me, then I want you to go all the way back to day 1 where we start in the very beginning of Genesis. So today is going to be actually pretty quick because if you've been reading the book of Job with me, which I hope you have, then a lot of this is, I don't want to say redundant, but a lot of this we see a lot of just back and forth happening between the people, between Job and his three friends. So very quick background is in the beginning of this book, Job is minding his own business. He's living his life. He does prayers for his family and his sons after they go out and they have fun. He is considered blameless. He is also considered the greatest man in this area, which I believe means he has a lot of money, he has a lot of possessions, he has a lot of things. He's probably pretty well respected. And then we find immediately the scene following that God is up in the heavens and the angels are up there as well, including Satan. And Satan says he was roaming the earth when God asks. He said he's roaming the earth. And then God asks if he has seen Job. Satan discusses how he's been protected, and then God essentially releases that protection and talks about Job's faithfulness and his blamelessness. So that brings us now we've met his three friends, and that brings us now to some interaction between them. One of the things that I am noticing as I'm reading this is that Job seems to be getting more and more and more frustrated as he's talking to his friends. And his friends seem to be getting more and more frustrated as they are talking to him. So it reminds me of, imagine that you're at a friend's house or at a family dinner and you bring up something that maybe is mildly uncomfortable, whether it be religion or politics, or those taboo issues that we don't talk about, or what's going on in a different area in the country, a war, or something that's mildly uncomfortable, something that that you will likely disagree on with your company. And then you start kind of arguing back and forth, and you say your points, they say their points, and then your points sort of twist, and then their points twist, and they start talking about slightly different things. And this feels like that's what's happening between these friends. And because they start out really well, they start out just comforting him and staying in silence. And then Job starts to speak. So, starting in chapter 15, like I said, it's going to be pretty short today because I didn't find too much that was too significantly different from what we've already seen. In verse 15, Eliphaz is replying to Job. So again, they've had some back and forth. We've met all three friends at this point, and now we're back to Eliphaz, who was his first friend who spoke. He is in so verse 1, we see that it is Eliphaz that's speaking, and in verses 2 through 6, one of the things that I noted is that he's showing his sin in his speech. So Job is showing his sin in his speech, and it now brings us back to Eliphaz condemning him. So Eliphaz is essentially like, listen to you, listen to how harsh you are, listen to how angry you are. And so it's sort of bringing him back to his original point that Job is the sinful one, and this is why Job is being punished by God because of his sin. And then I want to move right on 7 to 13. Eliphaz confirms that his friends, because Job is mad at his friends, and Eliphaz is like, aren't we mature? Aren't we older? Aren't we wise? So he's trying to get Job to listen to him and to hear what his friends are saying to him and to respond in that way. So now I want to move on to 14 to 16. And verse 15, I want to read out loud here. It says, if God places no trust in his holy ones, if even the heavens are not pure in his eyes, how much less mortals who are vile and corrupt, who drink up evil like water. I don't know if we have heard that God doesn't do that. So I don't know where we would ever have heard that God places no trust in any of his holy ones. and that the heavens are not pure in his eyes. Uh, and then, how mortals are violent and corrupt who drink up evil like water. Up into this point, which we as the readers have read Genesis up into this point, there was a time where he said that there was nothing but evil in our sight. And so he destroyed the whole world except for Noah, who he said was blameless and righteous in his eyes. And so I don't think that any of this is true. So I think once again, the person speaking, the speaker Eliphaz, is exaggerating, or he's changing some of his beliefs. He's manipulating, which again, I know I said already a few days ago, but this brings me back to the garden where a lot of these things are manipulated, and we have to be really careful about what we hear other people saying and what is actually true about God. And we would know what is true about God by what God says. So by what we see in his word and what he says. And at this time, God was speaking to people. So remember, we just went through the book of Genesis, and God actually met with Abraham and Isaac, and he spoke to Jacob, and he sent dreams. So there were ways in which that he met with Noah. So there are ways in which God is actually speaking to people. And so understanding the character of who God was a matter of speaking to him and knowing who he was. And we can see here that Job is talking to God. So it wasn't that he was unreachable. All right, and then I want to move to verse 17 to 35, and this is where Eliphaz talks about a wicked man and how he is tormented. And this really reminds me of, so he just kind of goes on and on about all this torment that happens to a wicked man, which makes me think that he thinks that Job is this person. God torments wicked men. Job is tormented. Therefore, Job is a wicked man. And so he's bringing it back to one thing equaling the other, that if we see that Job has been tormented, Job must be an evil man, and he must turn his heart back to the Lord, which of course is going to get Job frustrated once again. And so we go into Job 16, and then Job replies back to him, and he says, you guys are miserable comforters. What their intent was is to sit with him when he was going through tragedy has turned just into arguing, contempt, raking God's name through the mud. And so it has turned from something that was supposed to be good, and it has turned into something that is pretty ugly. And he's noticing it. Job feels it. He feels frustrated by them, and they feel frustrated by him as well. So it's not just him. They're also irritated and angry with him by what they believe is a wrong response from him. So verses 2 through 5, he tells them that they're terrible, and he would be better, he would be kinder if the roles were reversed. So he says I also could speak like you if I was in your place. And he said, I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you, but my mouth would encourage you. Comfort from my lips would bring you relief. And so even now he's sort of asking them, you're condemning me and you're calling me wicked. I need comfort from you. If I were in your place, I could see that you did everything wrong, but I would be comforting you instead. Moving on to 6:14, he is speaking to God, and he's talking about how he feels that God has just crushed him, and God has crushed him without pity, which is what I think is, again, what I think is one of the things that he's getting wrong, is that he thinks that that God is doing this on purpose, and that God is doing this without any pity or love or heart behind it, that he's condemning him, and he's condemning him. Again, he considers him to be condemning him wrongly. And then moving on to 18 to 22, he starts to plead with him in prayer. So reading some of that, he says, we're in chapter 16. He says, my intercessor is my friend, and my eyes pour out tears to God. On behalf of a man, he pleads with God as one pleads for a friend. So he's begging God. And at this point, he's begging God for death, to be relieved of any of the life that he has right now. I want to move right into 18. Sorry, I think we were in verse 16. We're going to go to verse 17, or chapter, 17. and he's saying his spirit is broken. And then in verses 1 through 9, one of the things that he discusses that he's upset about is that everybody is mocking him, and they're all condemning him. And obviously, we can see that his friends are doing the same thing. His friends are accusing him of being the one who's caused this sin, which is what is causing part of the problem. And so it's adding insult to injury. So it's bad enough that he lost everything, but now on top of it, those who had looked up to him and looked at him as, again, one of the greatest in that area, they are now all mocking him because of everything that he has lost. And even his friends are condemning him as, he was the greatest man before, and now he's obviously a wicked sinner that has turned his heart away from God. And in verse 10, he just says that he is hopeless. So in verse 17. All right, so let's go to Job 18, and this is now where Bildad is following up. Bildad he's it's just listening to them just back and forth and argue with each other. Bildad is irritated. When will you end these speeches? Be sensible, and then we can talk. He's thinking that Job is being unsensible. Job is thinking that the friends are being unsensible. None of them are listening to each other, and none of them are listening to God. None of them are really waiting for God to say anything, and they're all just kind of biting at each other. And I know I've been in situations where I've done this before, and it makes me think about now sitting back, hearing, not responding, just listening to what the other person has to say, and then reaching out to God in that way. A few days ago, when I was still in Genesis, I really talked a lot about finding God on our knees, really, and fighting my battles on my knees, which essentially is an expression for being in prayer and reaching out to God through these things, not using my own strength or my own wits or my own determination, but leaving all of that on God. Not saying to do nothing, right? There's never a time where we're kicking back, but we're leaning wholeheartedly on God. I want to lean wholeheartedly in everything I do. So if I'm in a discussion with someone, or if I'm trying to be sympathetic towards someone, or if I'm trying to even have a discussion or a relationship with God with somebody, I need to really sit back and reach to God first. And then if it starts getting ugly in this way, where there's just sort of back and forth banter, it's probably time to sit myself back and just listen to what the person has to say. Calmly, just probably respond with nothing, just a calm understanding and a caring for them, and letting them know that I'm just there and I'm there to listen. But he's not doing that. Bildad is not doing that. So we can say that Bildad is just fighting back. He keeps pushing back. And then in verses 2 through 4, he's complaining about Job's attitude. Imagine if you're Job, and you've just lost your entire family. You've just lost all of your finances. You're destitute. Your wife has turned herself away from God. And then these people come at you and tell you that it's all your fault. I think I'd be frustrated. And I think that I would fight back. But again, I think that he also needs to leave this open, leave his heart open to the Lord, and just sit back and listen. Because his attitude is getting bad. So in verses 5 through 21, Bildad is talking about how the wicked get punished. And here we go again, where I would say right back up into the prior chapter in 15. What he's doing is it sounds a lot like he's saying that he is the wicked. So again, he's going back to what God does and the greatness of God, which I would agree with the greatness of God. Some of the things that I want to look at in here is verse 14. And in verse 14 it says, so this is talking about the wicked. He's torn from the security of his tent and marched off to the king of terrors. And then in verse 18 it says, he is driven from light into the realm of darkness, and he is banished from the world. So these are really huge pictures of what happens, what God will do to the wicked, what God does to the wicked. And I'm sure some of you are saying, I don't always see that. And I would agree that that's true, that is not, it's not necessarily something that we see every day here on earth. is something we probably have to pray for and be patient about, knowing that God really does take care of the wicked and he does take care of those who love him. But it is not necessarily something it's not necessarily something we're going to see here on earth right in front of us. And it's certainly not something that we're always going to see in some kind of situation that we're in with someone that we consider ourselves the good and them the wicked, and we immediately want God to punish them. And that's not necessarily the way that it works. However, in the grand scheme of the world, that is how God works. God does punish the wicked, and he does uphold the righteous. And so we will see that. So I would say that I agree with a lot of what he says here is true. I just think what he's saying is geared towards Job and not geared towards Job isn't really wicked, but because of the actions we see here on earth, because Job went through what he went through, that's what he thinks that Job is. So in verse 21, we finish up this day with, surely such is the dwelling of an evil man. Such is the place of one who does not know God. This could be taken very literally. It could be also taken figuratively. And so one who doesn't know God may live in this way internally. There might be this internal turmoil. I don't know for sure. I'm just putting it out there that it might not be a very literal interpretation, although it could be a literal interpretation, but it could also be more of a metaphorical interpretation, that light is away from darkness, is like what we saw in the very beginning of Genesis, that God and Jesus is the light, and anything that is not the light is in darkness, and that darkness is not a good place to dwell. So we end on that note with him calling out sort of the wicked and what happens to the wicked and what the wicked looks like, still thinking he's wrong and observing that that is Job, or that is something that literally happens in this world all the time. I'm sure it does happen some of the time. We don't hold out our hope for that. We hold out our hope knowing that God is still God. So if this has been a blessing to you, we are going to continue with this reading. We're going to continue with Job. There's going to be a lot more back and forth between these guys. Job 19 starts tomorrow, which would be day 24. For those of you who do not have the reading plan, it is the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, which you can find online, or the 1 year chronological Bible, actually the book itself, to join in on the reading with me. Stick with your reading, even when it gets difficult, even when it feels redundant. Stick with it. God is opening your eyes up more and more to who he is. If you want to, I'd love if you've subscribed to the channel. I would love if you liked it and shared it with other people, so we can all sort of read up on who God is together and grow more and deeper in our relationship with who God is.